The world is indeed complex, and it doesn't always work the way you would like it to, as you have seen or heard, or maybe failed to hear this evening. So, anyway, I'm pleased to be here, and I'm pleased to talk about my new book. And, it's really nice that we have all these wonderful slogans on the walls. I am not the user, you are not the user, or faster feedback means better outcomes. And yeah, that's what I've written about all my design life. I've written about, can you hear me comfortably in the back? Just making sure. So, all my design life, what I've written about is how to make things easier to use, easier to understand. But you know what? The world is in a mess. And all these books are wonderful and useful, but they're not going to make a better world. So I decided, well, I've retired 5 times, and I don't think I want to retire anymore. And I'm a failure. I'm also getting old. I'm 87. And so I don't know how many more books are in me, but I wanted to do something that would make a difference in the world. And so what could I do? First of all, if you look at the problem, solutions. Well, I don't have anything to add. There are lots of good people who have written books and given talks and written articles about the solutions. The United Nations has been meeting for 25 or so years, every year to address the climate problem. They write these wonderful proclamations at the end. They have 149 or so nations that all sign it. And what has been the result? Nothing. If you take a look at all the wonderful books that have very powerful, useful, correct suggestions, what has happened? Nothing. So maybe it's time to take a different look at it. Now, one of the things that people who write these books say is, well, I'm going to tell you the technology solution. Bill Gates, for example, wrote a good book, and he's a very deep thinker, and he talked about here's the problem, and here are the multiple solutions, and here's probably the best couple. He did this over many different issues. But he said in the beginning, but I'm not a politician, I'm not going to talk politics. And that's why he failed. Because if we want to solve the problems of the world, it isn't enough to say, here's the problem, here's the solution. We have to understand politics, we have to understand business, we have to understand the way the world works. And it doesn't work the way we would like it to. But we have to live with that. There's this big sign all around the place. There's one, not the user. We are not the users. The economists, by the way, have lots of solutions. It's really interesting. Everybody trusts the economists. They run the countries of the world. They have these wonderful, powerful mathematical models, and they're almost always wrong. So why do we trust them? Well, because it's mathematics. They measure everything, even things that cannot be measured. And they always measure in terms of money. And they do not understand people. And that's the fundamental problem. So I said, look, I was trained as an electrical engineer, so I understand technology. I was trained as a psychologist, so I understand people. I've been a business executive. I understand how business works. Maybe I have a different perspective, and that's what the book is about. And the book is about, well, ask me your question.
So before we come to your questions, I have a question prepared beforehand. And the question is, what kind of role do we have as designers to make the world a better place? What would you say?
I'm going to say the world is all fucked up, and it's because of people like me, and it's going to be people like you who have to provide the answer. And I think design is ideally situated to provide the answer, but not the way design is practiced today. and not the way we teach designers today, and not the way most of you are acting today. So I'm here to tell you that it's time that you got promoted. Now, how do you get promoted? You're not going to get promoted by saying, we do good work. You're not going to get promoted by saying the things that we heard in the opening speech, that we are the right people. If you ever go to your managers and, well, first of all, notice where design is situated in the world. Most people think design is making beautiful products. Most people think design is something we call in afterwards to finish and make it sellable. Design is a tool of the Industrial Revolution, the tool of industry to increase sales and profits. We can do better than that. We are situated in the middle levels of universities. We're never the most important, well, seldom the most important school or department. We are in the middle levels of companies, large companies, never at the top level. How many designers are CEOs of major companies? How many large companies have chief design officers sitting at the top? Well, 20, 30 of all the companies in the world. Why is that? You might say, well, we weren't trained to do that. Well, what about engineers? Engineers are not trained to be leaders, yet how many engineers are CEOs of companies, large companies? Many of them. How many engineers are in the chief officer's position, chief product officer, chief technology officer, chief operating officer? Many of them. How do they manage? When you feel that you're not being respected by your company, for those of you who work in companies, or for that matter, university, for those of you who are in universities, or if you're consultancy by your clients, what do you tell them? You tell them how good your work is. You tell them that we have wonderful methods, that we really understand people. You tell them, look, here's the designs we've done. Here are the awards we've won. And you know what? When I was an industry executive, and I was in at least two very large companies, and I am founder of one small company. If somebody came to me and told me about the wonderful work they did and showed me all the prizes they won, I would say, yes, that's wonderful. That's why we hired you. So, excuse me, but now I must get back to work. That's not how you convince somebody. Nor do you convince them by telling them, look, our products have these problems, and you show them all the problems. They don't want to hear that. And it's not that executives do not want to know what is happening to the company. They do want to know. It's important that they know. But if you tell them that here are the problems, that does not help them. What you have to do is say, here are the solutions. Now, how do you describe the solutions? Well, one of the standard maxims that we teach in design is understand your customers, understand the people who use your stuff. And so, who are the people who use your stuff? Who are your customers? Oh, I have this new product. See, I made this little nice phone, see, and I listened to my people, and this is what I produced. Okay, but that's not your most important customer. Your most important customer is the people you work for. Because if they don't understand and appreciate what you're doing, you're never going to be in a position of power. So, what is their language? Can you speak their language? Their language is sales, profits, margins, future price of money, future cost of money. Their language is a language of economics and of business. And so, many of you work in companies where there's a marketing division. And marketing is always telling you to add new features. And you may say, those are stupid features, and all they do, nobody's ever going to use them. All they do is make the product more complex. And they manage to convince management to make you add those features. How do they do it? Well, they have spreadsheets. The magic trick is spreadsheets. And what they do is they show the increased sales and increased profits by adding these features. And you know what? They may actually be right. because they know what people buy. We don't. We know what people need. And so we need to partner with marketing because if people don't buy the product, it doesn't matter how good it is. And they know how to convince management, and most of you do not know. So, first of all, you need to learn. And second of all, if you partner with them, they can help you convince management because where did their numbers come from? Many people have asked me, many designers, why don't people listen to me? How come my engineers say get promoted to positions of authority and they don't promote designers? And I say, well, what do you think? Well, they went off and got an MBA or something. Yes. Well, good model. Why don't you? You don't need an MBA, but you need the knowledge that people get in an MBA. How do they get those numbers? They make them up. They lie. And you can make them up and lie just as well as they can, and that they'll be happy to teach you. But remember, executives are not stupid. You may think they are because they make decisions that make no sense to you. That's because they have other problems and other constraints that you don't know about. You have to know about them so you can help them. And so when you give them those figures that are made up, they know they're made up because they used to do that themselves. And moreover, there's no other way. If you're talking about a product and future sales, you don't have any real evidence. So what they want to know is it sensible? What assumptions did you make? Why did you get this number? How did you get this number? What are the ranges? And if you could do a good, credible case, then they might let you do something. And what you need to do is build up your credibility in saying, hey, I have a whole new business idea that could bring in more money and more sales and would be really attractive. And as long as it fits the expertise of the company, and as long as it doesn't conflict, keep at it, keep doing it. Remember, what does it say? Feedback is the best possible tool. So as long as it doesn't conflict with any other product that we're doing, et cetera, maybe they will do it. And as you become more successful at showing them that you can actually introduce new products, you might even get promoted. And then you can even talk more about what the company is doing and its strategy. And then, well, my book says to design a future world, what do we have to do? We have to make it meaningful, sustainable, and humanity centered. And all of those are necessary. None of those are being done today in a large way, and they will require changes in the way that business operates. And therefore, you're in a great position to make that happen. But you can't make it happen without understanding how business operates because business is going to have to change, and we'll cover that with some questions. And uh, that means you have to show them how, when we make these changes, it'll be beneficial, not for the world, but for the company. So I have a friend who started a company called an institute called the Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI, which is actually based on these arguments. His name is Emery Lovins, and he's long said, you if you want to convince a company to do something that's good for the world, you might even convince a company for a short time. But as soon as there's an economic downfall, they will stop it. What you have to do is convince them that the smoke coming out of the smokestacks and the trash coming out of the water pipes into the soil and the waterway, that's wasted money. Don't say it's harmful for the world. Say you're wasting money. All that is part of your product that you're throwing away. So he shows them how they can save money and save the world at the same time. And that's where you have to be. So that's the beginning. And now I have this new book that talks about that. And I don't give talks anymore. I answer questions. Because when I give a talk, I'm never sure whether you're really interested in it or not. If I answer questions, well, I know at least one person cares. So,
Thank you, Don, for this pep talk. Do we have any questions from the audience? If you have, raise your hand, and we're trying to get this microphone running so that you don't have to scream. I'm also checking in parallel the live stream if we have some questions. I'm not being rude.
There's one.
Yes, there is one. Sport session.
Does that one work? Yeah.
Yeah, it works.
Hi, good evening. Sir Don, my name is Andreas. I work for a large hotel company. Can you hear me? Obviously not.
Barely.
Can you hear me? Barely? Thanks for your thoughts. You talked about that the design community should have more influence, right? On the course of the world. For example, on politics, right? Now, one question which I don't know the answer. Has there ever been any attempt on a large scale of the design community to influence politics, like lobby, pressure groups, anything like that? I don't know about it. There's
So the question is: has there been any large attempt by designers to change the world, to change political views? Why do you care? Why is that? Why are you asking that question? Suppose I say no, it's never been done.
You said that like the politics put things into reality, like execute on it, and they are being influenced on a large scale by lobbies like tobacco, health industry, all those kinds. Why not the design community at the lobby stage?
Okay, but that's not the question you asked me. Yes, why not the design community? Look, now I've talked about what a company cares about. A company cares about staying in existence. A company has to make a profit in order to stay in existence. And a company that is doing wonderful, good work and no longer can stay, goes out of business, doesn't do any good. So it doesn't matter how good your product is if the company is no longer making it or nobody buys it. And I can tell you out of experience, because when was I at Apple? I joined Apple. Well, I like to tell people I was at Apple between jobs. I got to Apple just after Jobs left, and I worked for the person who fired him, John Scully. And I went through a succession of CEOs, worse and worse and worse and worse, till we got to the bottom. And then finally, they decided we needed a better operating system. And we tried to buy this company and that company and this company. And finally, they decided on Next Computer. And so we bought Next Computer, which was Steve Jobs' company. And Steve Jobs took one look at our CEO and said, So as far as Steve was concerned, he had bought Apple and we paid him for the privilege. But he decided that Apple was in bad shape. He had to get rid of all the executives, and I was a vice president. So all the vice presidents were fired. And the next step was to fire all the C-suite and the chief executive officer. And he took over, and he saved the company. So I'm not here to say he did the wrong thing in firing me. Actually, I was in charge of advanced technology, which was basically the research group. I think we did wonderful work. I lobbied and helped get the Wi-Fi banned into the United States. I lobbied and helped get the high definition standards into the United States. We did schools all around the world. We did QuickTime. We did all sorts of things. But when a company is failing, it can't afford a research group. And so he was right to let us go. But the point is, if you want to succeed, we now know what business executives care about. What politicians mostly care about is staying in power. Again, there are good politicians and bad politicians, but even the best of politicians is not going to be very effective if they do not have their position, if they don't stay in a position of power. So they care about what? They care about votes, people's votes. Do they care about money and lobbyists? Well, yes, mainly because the lobbyists give them money that they can use to help write all those television and magazine and newspaper advertisements that keep you voting for them. So it's votes. Now, the United Nations has listed 16 sustainable development goals. And those are the most important goals of all, like hunger and sanitation and good schooling and so on. Now, some of you may say, no, no, there are 17 goals. Yes, but number 17 is not one of those. Number 17 is, in order to succeed, we must band together in order to succeed in these goals. And so, back to the question or the comment, if we band together, we can influence the voting patterns. If we band together, you will see that. I mean, if you look to see who gets elected in your country or any group, it's the people who band together and say are for their candidate. And you may say, well, those are evil people. How come they got together and they elected their candidate? Well, because they got together. So we have to get together to elect the politicians that we think can do a better job. Now, most of you don't care about politics, but if you care about the world, you have no choice. You have to care about politics. You may not care about how a business is run. If you care about the world, you have to learn how a business is run. And some of you have to get promoted. Not all of the talents that you bring to your job, but every group ought to have at least one person who's up at the top who can speak for the power of design. I'll keep doing questions because there's more I can say, but I'll let the questions bring them out.
Do we have
But
more
is that
questions?
an answer? By the way, you've now noticed that you ask me a question, I'll give a speech. So I don't give talks, but I have thousands of talks in my head. And when you ask a question, what I try to do is give the background and the context, and I give a little talk.
We have there 2 questions.
There are lots of questions, so
Yes.
it's up to the microphone person.
Yes.
No, wait.
Oh, technique. It's working?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ah, great. Well,
But you still have to talk loudly.
yeah, I will. All right. You hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I was thinking about how to post that question, but you told us, or it's obvious that as a designer, to make an impact on several levels of people who are in C levels or wherever, we need to take a stand for our approach and what we think is really impossible to achieve, maybe for people from economics, but from the users, or to make the world a better place. And I'm wondering if you could evaluate a little bit more, or talk a little bit more about how to take a stand if, for example, the things you decide to do as a design crew or whatever are absolutely against the economics. And you need to convince people that it's worthwhile to do so, even if this would mean that the company might struggle, not fail, but you need some more time to achieve it. So this is really interesting because taking a stand for what you believe in not always is in great companies, sometimes for economics and stuff like that, I assume. But maybe you have some more thoughts about it. Obviously more experience than I. So that would be really interesting.
That question is fundamental. That in order to convince a company to do something, they have to decide that it's worthwhile, that they will stay in business. So you have to understand their business model and demonstrate that this will not cost them so much that they will go out of business. And there are several ways of doing that. So Patagonia is an American sporting goods company, and they are not the normal. We have several classes of official corporations. In the United States, the 2 most important ones are S class and C class. You don't have to know about them, but both of them have as sort of built into their system that they owe their allegiance to the shareholders. A B class, which is now starting to become popular, is looking to make a better approach, which is they do not owe their allegiance to the shareholders. They owe their allegiance to their customers, to their workers, and to the community in which they are located. Now, Patagonia makes good products. I actually saw somebody here wearing one. And that they say, first of all, the company is owned by the employees now. Second of all, if you buy something from them and it gets ripped, you can send it back to them and they will repair it and send it back to you. If your clothes get so ripped or destroyed that you can't wear them anymore, you send it back to them and they will use the insides, the components of the clothing, to make new clothing. That's called the circular economy, and I'll get to that in a minute. It costs them a little bit more money to do this, so they charge a little bit more money for this. And they have convinced their population of people that it's worth it to pay a little bit more money for their clothing in order to help the world. Now, that happens to work well in the sporting environment, in the hiking environment, and the people who love the wilderness and buy Patagonia clothes. Or for people like me who just want to stay warm, and I appreciate Patagonia's philosophy. But it won't work for every company, but it will work for some. So, how do you convince them that it's not going to kill them? Well, first of all, if you can't convince them, then you have the wrong approach, or maybe the wrong company. But sometimes it's going to be difficult. So let me tell you about the circular economy. This is now, I'm going to be talking about physical products. We can come to digital products if you wish, because they have other kinds of issues, but similar. In the physical product world, we are now enamored so much of these wonderful, lovely little computers and cell phones and powerful and sleek automobiles and this, that, and the other that, well, let me tell you about human-centered design. So I've been promoting human-centered design for a long time. If you read the book, The Design of Everyday Things, it's all about human-centered design. And I tell you that it is wrong. There's nothing that I say that is wrong. It's what I do not say that is wrong. That I think we heard in the earlier opening thing that designers have the power to save the planet. Well, it's designers who've already helped destroy the planet. And why is that? Well, I never talked about, when I get these wonderful materials, how I must mine them from countries and how I destroy the environment in the mining and destroy the lives of people who are basically enslaved, low-cost laborers, to do it. How I destroy the environment in smelting the material to transform it from the rocks into things that can be manufactured. How I destroyed the environment in the manufacturing process, how I destroyed the environment in the fact that I made it so sleek and sexy that you couldn't repair it. It was really difficult to take apart and to repair. And then, in fact, since it was difficult to take apart and to take the components out, so after its lifespan, you couldn't reuse the components. And then, moreover, the business model was that the lifespan should be as short as possible. Because a company like, I'll name an arbitrary company, Apple, or Microsoft, or Samsung, they make their money by selling products. So if a product lasted 10 years, how would they stay in business? So that's harming the environment. How shall we make things? Well, I like to take, none of you have an orange here, I suspect, but I love to hold up an orange or a banana and say, this is nature's product, complete with package. The package is a skin. I remove the skin, and now I have the edible part inside, and I eat it. And then what do I do with the skin? Well, what I could do is throw it on the ground. You can't in a big city, but if you're in the countryside, you can throw it on the ground, and guess what? It becomes fertilizer to help grow the next orange tree or banana tree or whatever. It's reusable. Everything is reusable. And there are companies already doing this. Patagonia is one. Nespresso. Those of you who use these little coffee pods to make your coffee, those pods are completely recyclable. In fact, when I buy Nespresso pods, I get a big bag. And when after the pods are used, I put them in the bag. And when the bag gets full, I go to my computer and print out a mailing label, which Nespresso provides me, and I mail it back. The mailing label means it doesn't even cost me anything to mail it back. And the pods are made out of aluminum. And the easiest thing to recycle is aluminum. It simply melts and comes back as pure aluminum for the next product. And the coffee grounds that were inside either become fertilizer or, when packed tightly, can become building construction materials. Complete circular economy. Other products do the same, but that's the easiest to explain. We have to do that. Now, there are two things here. First of all, it's fine for coffee pods because you've used it once. You have to buy a new one to use another one. So it truly is a consumable. But not everything is consumable. So how do you deal with that? What of your cell phone? There's a company called Fairphone that makes phones that are easy to repair and that can keep going for, like, they hope, 10 years. If the camera becomes obsolete, well, you can open up the Fairphone and unplug the camera and plug in the new camera they'll supply you with and send back the old camera so they can use the components. Or the old camera, which is still a perfectly good camera, could be used for other purposes, etc., etc. So how do you stay in business, though? Is it going to cost more money to do this? Yes. And is it going to be, what happens since you can't sell a new phone every 2 or 3 years? Well, once upon a time, telephones were not purchased. We used to tell the phone company we'd like to have a phone, and so you would pay a monthly subscription. You still pay a monthly subscription, but in those days they provided you with the phone also. And more importantly, they guaranteed that it would always be working. And if when something went wrong with the phone, they would send somebody out to repair it or figure out what the issue was, or if necessary, give you a new phone. They treated phones as services. Now, everything is a service. If you buy a new camera, you may be, oh, it's a delightful camera. I bought a product. Yes, but why did you buy the camera? You bought it for the experience it's going to give you, for the fact that you could capture experiences over time and look at them later on or share them with other people. And so the camera is really a service. Now, suppose we shifted our emphasis from the selling of products to the selling of services. That might be the way we get out of this cost bind. And do people like to pay money every month? Not really, but we did that with the phone company a long time ago. And it probably wouldn't amount to any more money than you're paying now. And many of you buy your phones from the cell phone provider at this point, where you do have to pay a monthly fee. So that's one possibility. There are others. Safety, automobile safety. How did it come about? Oh, the automobile companies fought it. They hated it. In fact, I had a fight once with a senior executive from General Motors who said, don't even talk about safety, because every time you mention making cars safe, what you're doing is you're telling the public that the cars today are not safe. What a horrible idea. But the cars were not safe. He said, it's okay. Look, the free market will take care of that. If people really wanted safe cars, they would buy safe cars. But they wouldn't buy safe cars if they weren't available. And so the solution was laws, legal laws and regulations that forced the companies to provide seatbelts. That was the first regulation. And then more and more. What that was, it meant that if it cost you more money to put in seatbelts and you'd have to raise the price of the car, that puts you at an economic disadvantage. But if every company is forced to provide seatbelts, then you're not at an economic disadvantage. Everybody has the same problem. And now safety has become so important that cars now brag about the safety features of their cars. Now, we should be able to do that about sustainability. We should be able to do that about other issues that are facing us. So it's not going to be easy to find new business models. But I believe that, hey, you guys are all designers. And one of the things designers are proud of is their creativity. So be creative and let's try to invent new business models. Because, as we heard, the companies are very concerned about the costs and how much they might have to charge their customers. And if they charge too much, the customers will stop buying. The business model is critical. So let's invent ones that are practical.
Okay, thanks. We had a question in the back there. I have seen you, but
Several
yeah,
questions in the back there.
in the last row, right? Wir versuchen es die ganze Zeit.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm out. Okay, great. First of all, it's an honor. Yeah. So my takeaway from reading the book is that we can look for some kind of, I don't know, thing that we can use in order to start the dominoes rolling in a way, right? Find a little piece, a little modular piece of something, part of the business that we can influence, that we can change, and get the ball rolling from there. Now, I don't know if that's really the message, but my fear is, my thought is taking me there, that, okay, what happens when people start noticing, that, okay, you are changing things are becoming a little different, and they are perhaps clashing with this worldview that you mentioned in the book has been kind of created over thousands of years of people designing things, and so now you have all these systems that kind of clash with this idea. So what can we do in a way to kind of protect ourselves while we are making these changes? Because my fear is that as we do this, there's going to be a lot of resistance and a lot of fighting against us.
And if we don't do it, there's going to be a lot of resistance and a lot of fighting. But yeah, first of all, you're right. People, on the whole, do not like change, even if it's going to be beneficial. Second, though, this change will not be rapid. It's going to take decades to make the changes. It's going to be slow. Look, just take a look at our energy sources today. The fossil fuel industry dominates still, and it's producing methane and carbon dioxide and other basically climate warming, heat trapping gases into the atmosphere. Suppose for the moment that every company doing this knows it's bad and would like to stop it. But we can't stop overnight because the world is dependent upon electricity and the replacements take time. So I give you as an example China. China is the world's best company at producing renewable sources of energy. They're also one of the worst countries in producing, fossil fuel emissions. But they actually, because they're run by a dictator, essentially, it makes it easier for them to force the country to make these changes, and they are making rapid changes. In fact, I just have been finishing this kind of world trip. This is the last stop, but I started with a week in Singapore, and then a week in Shanghai, and then a week home for a week, and then I was in Milan and Florence and Oslo, and now here. And when I was in China, a couple of years ago. The streets were noisy. They were filled with motorcycles and motor-driven everything. Now the streets are not noisy at all. People are not blowing their horns. And all those small vehicles are electric. And many of the cars are electric. Now, I just bought myself a nice new electric vehicle made by a German company, in fact. I bought a BMW i4. And it's a really nice car. I love it. But when I sat in the Chinese cars, they were better than the BMW car. They are doing a really excellent job, and they have large numbers of them. I even may have had some say in the i4. I'm not sure. I consulted with BMW for 3 years, helping devise the i3, the first car. We were talking a lot about the issues of electric vehicles. So I would come to Munich for a week or so every couple months for 3 years. The Chinese are doing a better job than we are. But they are not doing it overnight. It's going to take them 10 or more years to finish. And that's going to be true with all of us. Norway, where I just came from, is trying hard to make a change, but Norway is one of the world's largest suppliers of oil. But we need the oil. What we don't need is new oil production companies, and we don't need new coal burning companies because it's now cheaper and faster to build a solar farm or a windmill or even a hydroelectric farm, hydroelectric power, than it is to do a new coal farm, coal burning farm. The problem we face this in the United States. We have these wonderful, huge solar cells, arrays producing lots of energy, but they're there and the people are here. And to connect them, we have to have a power line. And it can take a year or two to build the solar cells, and it can take 10 or 15 years to get permission to build the power line. And that's what's holding the world back. It's true, I gather here as well, is here in Germany and here in Europe and in most countries of the world. People really want things to happen. They know that it must be changed. They want the power here with them, but not in my backyard. That's called NIMBY. People don't want it to disrupt their lives. And that's a problem because some of the stuff, although it may be slow changes, will be disruptive. Some of the changes in companies, well, like the building of electric vehicles, it takes less people to build an electric vehicle than to build a fuel powered gasoline engine. Will lose their jobs. And that is a problem that we have to deal with. And many of them cannot be re-educated to take new jobs. Been in this job for a very long time. They're not back to school and learn fundamental mathematics or other skills. No. It's something that the world will have to deal with. It's a very important and major problem. But I don't think we have a choice because if we don't stop things, the world is already changing. So what I say about climate change is the problem of climate change is it causes fires and wars even, and hunger and famine and floods, windstorms. The good news about climate change is that it causes fires and floods and famine and hunger. So people are starting to take it seriously.
We have also some questions back there before I come to you. I still noticed. So, yeah, Ali.
Working? Yes. Hi. First, thank you for the book.
A little bit louder.
Yes, a little louder. Thank you for the book first. Very much necessary. I really like how you explain and describe how design needs to broaden its view and its field and needs to like play in different battles and need to be promoted and talk to management, etc. But at the same time, you're saying, and this is very much true, that designers still are in this corner, or you're making stuff pretty. Like, give me the design. Is the design ready? Is it looking good? Stuff like this. So my question is, do you think we should stop calling ourselves designers and instead frame it differently? Because the discussion about how a designer needs to be promoted to a C-level position to change the business and that we actually know what we need will be tough enough than actually doing this change that we need to do.
I've been involved in many, many major design schools. I've taught in South Korea at KAIST. I'm a professor at Tongji University in Shanghai. I've taught courses at Stanford. I've taught at Northwestern, at Harvard, at University of California, San Diego. And nobody likes the word design. You know, one of the most famous design companies is IDEO in Palo Alto. And they don't call themselves a design firm anymore. And the problem is this. Nobody can think of a better word. So instead of trying to figure out the word, because I've been involved, it feels like hundreds of conversations trying to figure out what we should call ourselves. Why don't we simply try to train everybody in the world that we are more than making it look pretty, that we can play a more important part? Thank you. Why don't we try to convince the world that design is more than making it look pretty. So remember, IDEO and the D School at Stanford came out a few years ago with design thinking. It really pissed off most designers because designers said, that's what we've been doing for hundreds of years. Well, not hundreds, 100 years. And, and moreover, IDEO has trivialized it. They aren't doing the complexity that we really do. And so now everybody thinks they can take a weekend course or a short course and they're suddenly a designer. Well, right. But the good part is that as design thinking became popularized and it was captured by the business schools, they realized that design was more than making something look pretty. And so design thinking is now being taught in business schools. But let me point out that if I take a course in design thinking, I am not a highly skilled designer. If I take courses in tennis playing, I can play tennis. But I'm really crappy at it, which gives me actually, I understand much better the skills of a professional. The same thing with automobile driving. I thought I could drive a car, but I then bought a Porsche. And my two sons made me take a driving course, and they took it with me. It was a weekend driving course. We spent all day driving on a racetrack and in the parking lot. In the parking lot, because it was an empty parking lot. It was a parking lot of the racetrack and no race was on. And so what they did is parking lots get covered with oil because cars leak. And so they simply poured water on it and made it really slippery. And so we spent a whole day skidding and learning how to control skids. And let me tell you, if you think you know how to get out of a skid and you've never actually really practiced and learned, you don't. Everybody is taught that if you have a skid, steer into the skid. No. There are two kinds of skids. It's if the front wheel skid, that's called an understeer, and if the rear wheel skid, that's called an oversteer. And let me tell you, steering into the train, no. Basically, you brake or don't brake, or accelerate or don't accelerate. Braking is not slowing you up; it's changing the weight. If you brake, you put the weight on the front wheels. So if the front wheels are skidding, brake gently. If the rear wheels are skidding, don't brake. That'll make it worse. You want more weight in the rear wheels, so you accelerate slightly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The point is, the more I learned about driving a car, and then I drove the car on the racetrack as fast as I could, and later on we rented a racetrack, me and my two sons, for the whole day, went through a whole set of really expensive Porsche tires, and there were turns where I had to go around it at like 20 miles an hour. I couldn't go any faster. And then I had to accelerate to 100 miles an hour. And then there was a next turn, and I had to go back to 20 miles an hour. And then there was another thing. There was a little rise, and the car is in the air. And then just behind it, the racetrack curves. And so you have to somehow in the air be ready. Let me tell you, it's complex. And I was driving this car all alone with nobody else on the racetrack. It made me realize how complex a race car driver's life was when there are all these other cars in the way. And by the way, when I was going fast, to the professional driver, I was really slow. So I'm hoping that design thinking is the same thing, that it gives people more appreciation for what professionals actually do. Because all those people taking these design thinking courses, they love it. But when they actually try to apply it, they do a crappy job. Now, I want them not to think that therefore design thinking is wrong. I want them to think that now it's time to call in the professionals.
Thank you. We have 15 minutes left, so we have now the question here.
So I should give shorter answers.
If you want to have more questions, yeah. Here in the second row. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm happy you pointed out SDG number 17. Well, okay. Yeah. Hi. So I'm happy you pointed out to SDG number 17, partnerships, because it's my favorite sustainability goal. And So to Andreas, who asked about are there any lobbying efforts to join forces or so come talk to me at the Mojito Bar or something. I really like to connect people where I think they should have a conversation, or introduce them to some concepts to benefit corporations, B Corps, for example, or there are already so many organizations where, for example, they have knowledge about politics, but they have no idea about design or marketing. So as Don said, we designers need to find out or be interested in politics and business. So maybe just join some organization that is heavy in this aspect. But what I wanted to ask you is, what do you think about legal design? So make legal documents easier to understand, to read, so that people actually read it and get to know the consequences of a new Gesetz, of a new act. Yeah.
I don't understand what you're saying. If legal documents were easy to understand, lawyers would go out of business. Yeah. If you join any of the many different non-government organizations or groups that are trying to lobby, for the right thing, don't join as a don't just join as a member. Become an officer. Just like I say, you must have a leadership role in your company. If you're going to join these organizations just as another member, no, I want you to have a major say in what the organization is doing and how it's operating. So become an officer. But you can't just become an officer by saying, let me be an officer. You have to prove yourself. You have to understand what the organization is trying to do and what its abilities are and what its finances are and so on. But often these are volunteer organizations, and so they really welcome people who wish to help them. But you've got to demonstrate you have the skills they need. But yes, there are many organizations. But the problem is, some people say, why don't we explain this better to the politicians? No. Explanation isn't going to do it, because first of all, they all know it. Some of them deny that they know it, but everybody knows the story. The Pope is in favor of it. So actually, one of my colleagues at the University of California, San Diego, is the person who has explained it all to the Pope, and he gets called in to be the Pope's emissary in climate change and other things. And it doesn't make any difference. The United Nations knows about it. That's why they have all these meetings about it, but nothing happens. But also, don't forget things like politics. So take the President of the United States for the moment, Biden. I'll speak of him only because I know him better than I know other presidents or leaders. He believes in this, absolutely, and he's pointed people in his cabinet who believe in this. But can he get the United States Congress to act? No. He is simply unable to move our political system because the president doesn't have very much power, at least not in our country. And I think that's also true in many other countries. So that's why we have to band together, and that's why the voting on the politicians is so important.
Do we have any questions?
As for the legal question, there are lots of people who have tried that. Now, one thing I learned early on in this is that laws are almost always ambiguous, deliberately ambiguous. Because when you have a whole bunch of legislators all trying to pass a law, all of them with very different opinions, one way of getting something through is to make it so ambiguous that everybody can read their own interpretation into it. And that's, of course, one of the problems, because then it's up to the courts to interpret it and decide what it means. And therefore, it gets debated all the time. So lawyers often try to cover every single specific possibility, but the way they describe it is unintelligible to the rest of us because each word has a very, very specific meaning that we are unaware of. But yeah, they need help, and they know it, by the way.
Thank you. Rainer has a question. It's not.
So you talked about educating designers, and you've educated so many and work with so many. And sometimes I wonder, are we too nice? I mean, design attracts generally nice people. We're like generally not very aggressive, not domineering people who want to work with others to get a solution. Sometimes, at least, that's what I perceive. And for people like this, what might be the things to learn to have an impact, to create an impact in organizations, or what is it that sort of would complement personalities like this?
Designers are nice people. Designers are people. And some people are nice and some people are not. So Steve Jobs is a nice person? Come on. Bill Gates is a nice person? Like, I can think of a lot of people. Helmut, the guy who started uh, design, damn it. Frog design. Nice German. Was he a nice person? None of these were nice people. But they got things done because they had a vision and they made sure their people did it. But they weren't very nice about making people follow their vision. I'm not saying that's the way to be. I'm just saying that designers are people like everybody else, and some of us are more mild and some of us are more. Let me tell you that one thing that I am not good at is critiquing something. Because when I hear a presentation or I see a design and I say, oh, I think that could be better, and I try to explain this, and the result is not that the person says, oh, thank you. The result is the person is in tears. And what I used to happen, in fact, the design lab, which I recently started at University of California, San Diego, and I just retired from. Well, I retired in December 2020. We used to have presentations, and I used to give my friendly critiques. And one of my colleagues would always stand up afterwards and he would say, well, don't listen to Don. And then he would give this wonderful statement about how wonderful the work was and the vision that the person was presenting, and then present exactly the same critique I did, but in a way that made the person smile and be happy. So I'm not one of those nice guys either, necessarily. And in this case, it's not because I don't want to be. It's just I don't know. I was trained the wrong way. I went to MIT as an undergraduate, and we learned that we would criticize each other. And then my first job was at Harvard, where actually you would criticize each other. But I've given talks at Cambridge and at Oxford, and if my talk is not criticized, it means I gave a bad talk. But when you go to industry and you try to say the same thing, people used to take me aside and say, Don, that's not how we do things in industry. So, yeah, I think what's important is you have a vision, that you know what needs to be done, and you bring together the people that can make it happen. I will say this about all the people I just mentioned, Gates, Steve Jobs, etc. They tried to assemble a bunch of really bright, creative people, and they would listen to them, and they would allow differences of opinion. But they still had a vision, and as long as the differences of opinion were moving towards that vision, it was acceptable. And once he announced the decision, then no criticism was allowed. Because if you keep criticizing, you'll never get anything done. Creativity. You know, the nervous system, just to simplify emotions, we have two kinds of emotions, the positive ones and the negative ones. The positive ones are happy. So when I want you to be creative, I'll have a brainstorming session, and we'll bring you in early in the morning and give you good food, and we'll play games, and we'll be happy, and then we'll do the creativity stuff, and you will be very creative. And when we finally decided what we want to do, I don't want you to be creative. I've worked with people like that. They have a brilliant idea. Actually, John Scully was just like that. Don, come into my office. I have a new idea. Stop everything you're doing. And I go to his office and say, but John, you had a great idea last week. Well, this is a better idea. John, your idea last week would take 200 people 2 years to finish. You can't change your mind all the time. So how do we do it in product design? How much time do you need to finish the design? You think you need 6 months? Okay, how about 4? You want to do design research? How long is that going to take? You need that much time? How about half as much? I want you to be stressed. I don't want you to be so stressed that you freeze. I want you to be stressed at just the right amount so that you are no longer creative, but rather, because when you have a slightly negative emotional state, you are focused. And that's what you need to finish the product. And so a lot of the people are doing this. A lot of the ones that are nasty designers, nasty managers know that. They want to keep you focused, and so they create an atmosphere of fear. That's not what we want. But nonetheless, by giving you some real budget limitations and time limitations, then we do create this kind of stress that causes you to be focused. Now, what's that got to do with climate change and circular economy? And let me make a separate comment. It hasn't come up. Some of you, maybe most of you, work in the digital economy where you do digital things, and you say, "Oh, well, I can see why mining the earth is destroying the earth, and manufacturing is destroying the world, and all that stuff." But I work in digital. That's right. Well, let's think about the system in which we live. And we must think about the system. What was wrong about the design of everyday things? I talked about the system. Yeah, a cell phone requires a cell station and requires a transmitter and requires this, that, and the other. But it was all for this one product and one task and one thing. The system is the world. So when you do a digital product, well, how does anybody benefit from it? Well, it takes a device, right? They have some kind of machine. And what is that machine powered by? Well, it's powered by electricity. And where does the electricity come from? And is it a browser? Okay. And are they doing search? Well, how do you do a search? Well, we go up to the cloud, and we have all these big machines there that quickly find the answer. Quickly. How many machines? How powerful? You know how big these server farms are? How much electricity a server farm uses and how it destroys the earth? Actually, now more and more server farms are being located right next to hydroelectric power, but that means they're far away from the people who use it, so we lose a lot of that energy in the transmission lines. And Chat GPT, isn't that wonderful and powerful? Do you know how much energy it takes to train one of those systems? Enough energy to power a small town, a huge amounts of energy. It's a significant percentage of the world's use of electricity. And how much power does it take just to answer a query? You may think it's fast. It isn't fast. Notice the answers come a little bit slowly. It's doing a tremendous amount, and most of those companies are losing money every time you ask a question of ChatGPT because it takes so much computer power and so much energy, and not all of it comes from renewable sources. So first of all, you have to have a device, and how is that device manufactured? And second of all, we have this whole line. You can't escape it by saying I'm doing digital. If you think about the whole impact, then it's bad. I had a conversation this afternoon about ordering stuff from the internet, right? Say from Amazon, which delivers it almost immediately using trucks. Right now, they're all gasoline powered. They are moving towards electric, but then you still have the problem, where does the electricity come from? And it clogs up the streets and causes all sorts of problems, but it really makes our lives easier. Are there other models that we could use to give us that rapid delivery without such impairment? And even on the short walk I had this afternoon, we came up with several models. So there's a lot we can do in every case. And if we bring positive, useful suggestions to our companies, taking into account the business models and their need to maintain the company, then we will be appreciated. And appreciated means they will understand more and more that we are more than making a product. We are actually thinking about the entire system and the company. We understand the issues of the company. And then some people might even get promoted to higher levels, or better, the design division might be moved up to be equal to, say, marketing, so that when a new decision is to be made, not only do you have the marketing people there and the sales people and the chief technology officer, you will have the chief design officer. And that only happens if you start thinking much larger, take on a lot of the responsibility for yourself to create a better world.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the time is up. We have no more time for questions. I'm sorry. Thank you for your questions. So seize this opportunity to gather around, connect more, speak about this topic. And also, if you are interested, there is a sustainable UX community led by Torsten Jonas, which is called sustainableuxmanifesto.com. So please check it out. Be part of the community. Oh, I'm sorry, it's written wrong here, but yeah, thank you. So
So how do
please
they get in
connect.
touch with
Feel
you?
free to discuss further the topic. Do you want to say?
sustainableuxnetwork.com. And we have a nice podcast as well.
Thank you. So and also a special thanks to you, Don, for your brilliant answers. They were so inspiring. Thank you very much for your time.
But now tell them that.
Yeah, and in the networking session, you can get some autographs and some pictures with Don. So feel free to to come up
So
to.
evidently they've rented the bar someplace
Yeah, it's right around the corner, but
right
there will
around the
be
corner,
more
and I will
information.
be there. But let me tell you about signing books, because a lot of you probably want me to sign books, and I'm happy to do it, but I have to do it efficiently. And if you want your pictures taken, I'm going to warn you, I don't look at cameras, I look at you. So I want the photographer. We may have to get a special photographer who knows to take the picture when it looks natural and you're looking at me and I'm looking at you and we're talking. But if you wait for me to stare at the camera, I'm not going to stare at the camera, nor do I want you to.
Okay, and before we are heading to the networking part, there was one more thing, and I would like to welcome Thomas, the Vice President of the German UPA, on stage.
Well, what an evening it has been, and I think there's one thing that is left. And there's one thing there's left. I was asked to make up my mind and think about something, how to give a laudatio to really honor you with an award. And by getting to know you, and I found out you really hate when guys stand up, ramble 5 minutes about your career and all these achievements. So what have I done? I threw everything away, and I will do it in a different way. Because what we want to do is we want to honor a true UX legend. And this UX legend we had here. Why is Don a UX legend? He leads by example. He told us about his experiences. He told us about the way he sees the world, not to brag about him being the coolest guy, but for us to think, to see his example, and follow in his footsteps. That's what legends do. Legends are honest, legends are humble, and legends lead by example. Thank you for all of that. And what's now really left for me is to hand you an award. And true legends overcome all obstacles, including technical ones. So really, thank you, the UX Legend Award of the German UPA. We want to honor special persons that had really driven the whole community and all of our field forward. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So in India, I got an award. I'm a guru. By the way, guru in India simply means teacher. Um, and now I'm a legend. But actually, let me tell you, let me give a short advertisement for something I'm doing, which is relevant actually to speaking of awards. Because I got a big award in China a year ago, and I said, what a waste. It's nice to get awards. Thank you very much. But it doesn't change what I'm going to do. And so a bunch of my friends have always wanted to have an award in my honor, and they wanted to collect a bunch of money and give awards to some famous people who do good things. And when I got that award, I said, no, it doesn't make any difference. So actually, I got a bunch of money with the award too. And I said, okay, let's have an award for young, early career practitioners when they need it the most. People who are doing something, actually creating something in the world that has to be like one of those 16 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, using humanity-centered design, and they have to have done enough that they have evidence that my jury can look at it and say, this shows great promise. They'll be young, they won't have much money, they won't have been able to do anything substantial, but they will have done enough that we can say, yes, this is wonderful. So we've started, it's now called the Don Norman Design Awards. It's actually even have a website. It's not very good, but I was told that by the time I return in November, it'll be better. It's called the Norman Award .design. We found the domain called .design. Why not? And we hope to give out the first awards in November of 2024. And I now have a crew of roughly 20 pretty senior designers from around the world who are each charged with finding a bunch more of people to circulate around and find these young practitioners. Young practitioners are hard to find. We can easily find early academics who have promise. But the problem with design academics is they have designs. And they don't know if they're going to work or not. They may even win prizes with them. But I've seen too many design students go off to the middle of Africa or wherever, spend a few weeks, come back. I understand the problem, design something, even win a prize. But it never works when it's implemented in the country because you don't know the country and the people and their capabilities. It has to come from the people. So that's what I'm after. And yeah, I hope that this will make a difference because there will be awards that may change the lives of the people who receive them. So this one is very nice, and I'll put it on my shelf. But I have to tell you, it's not going to change my life. Too late.
Thank you. And as I said, what really changes lives is getting in touch with inspiring people. We will have the chance to talk to you. We will have the chance for autographs and pictures. And obviously, you will all have the chance to connect to each other because to make one of us stand out and speak for the others, we have to get together, we have to collaborate, and we have to talk about the good we're doing. So let's start this down there in the Mojito. Thank you. Thanks, Don.